Assalamu alaikum students, this is Shahbaz Khan and back here again with yet another lecture of English and this time again continuing my grammar series. So starting the time with the name of Almighty Allah, who is the most gracious and the most merciful. So on your screen now, as you can see, that's lecture number 6 of grammar series, and today we are talking about adjective and the categories of adjective. Now, adjective is a huge topic, as everybody knows already, and I have decided to have at least 3 separate lectures of adjective, and this happens to be the first one in shape of the lecture 6 of grammar series. You will have lecture number 7 and lecture number 8 to come, and both will be related to adjective and the second and the third part of adjective. So that is part number 1. Today when I'm sharing this screen to you, this is actually adjective, and I'm going to discuss adjective with categories today. We'll discuss its variation in the next lecture, lecture number 7, and in our lecture number 8 we'll discuss its degrees as well. So kindly stay tuned and stay watching. So without further ado, let us get started with our today's lecture. Now, what is adjective, by the way? When we start to understand what adjective really means, then the simple idea that comes into our mind is adjective is either a definition or a description of a name, and in other words, for name. Like to combine and connect all the lectures together, if you remember noun is the name. So when I talk about name, obviously I do refer the noun, and when I talk about for name, don't forget view the previous lecture of pronoun when you find things clarified there as well. When I talk about for nouns, I would obviously talk about the pronoun. For name, I would say I would talk about the pronoun. So in other words, the concept comes out to be that adjectives defines either a name or whatever comes in place of a name. Now that in place of is actually used for. So either you say for name or in place of a name. So adjective actually describes, modifies or defines a name or anything that replaces the name. So that is the concept of adjective. Hope you understand, have understood that. Now let us talk about the categories of adjective. Now in other words, we can call them the types of adjective. And one thing is that I would want to clarify here to all my listeners and my viewers is that people tend to create so many types and so many categories of adjective in our society. But the thing is, when I come across telling you about the categories of adjective, I find only 2. So there are only 2 categories of adjectives, and the rest of the types get attached to those categories, either the first one or the second one. We'll find out how. So let's talk about the categories of adjective. So as I've told you, there are 2 categories of adjective, the first of which is determiners and the second is descriptions, or in other words, descriptive adjectives. Or should I say less interesting adjectives when I talk about determiners, or more interesting adjectives. Why is it more interesting when I say about descriptions to be more interesting adjectives? Because they are normally considered or portrayed to be adjectives in general. The normal adjectives and formal adjectives do tend to come inside the fold of descriptions or descriptive adjectives. So that makes it look more interesting adjectives, and determiners become less interesting. We'll find out why. So let us start from descriptions. So descriptions can be qualifier, can be quantifier, as well as modifier. So when I talk about qualifier, I have clear meanings like in the likes of enormous, as you can see on the screen, gorgeous, woolen, dangerous, red, etc., all of which describing the quality or qualifying a noun or a pronoun. Then when we talk about quantifier and descriptions as quantifier, then we have either the ordinal way to say, which is third, second, fifth, eighth, or the cardinal way to say 20, or 21, 30, 8, 9, whatever, which are actually counted or can be counted. When we can simply measure things without counting them, then we can even use many, few, little, etc. There are many more examples like that. So they become quantified, they express quantity. So then there's modifier. So modification can be done through multiple ways, exactly on such words which are which would be carrying different meanings when taken differently, and when attached to another adjective, they become modifiers. So modifier here by meaning to modify adjective further. Say if I have a car, so I can even say a good car. Now good is adjective, as you can see, and if I want to even modify good, then I would say I have a pretty good car. So that pretty can be can carry a different meaning in different other sentences, but here it is actually modifying a certain adjective, good. Hope this clarifies you. So we have pretty, very, extremely, quite, etc. These are the additional adjectives, as you can say, which actually modify the current adjectives or placed before those of which would be seen in the sentence first. So these are the three descriptions, as you can see. And when we talk about determinants, so the first thing that comes into into the screen before you is the same possessive adjective. Now for that you need to view pronoun and its cases. That lecture I have placed before this one, and you'll find out what are the differences between possessive pronouns and possessive adjectives. I'm talking about possessive adjectives here. So then it becomes interrogative adjectives. Then we have demonstrative adjectives. So let's talk about them in a bit detail. So when we talk about possessive adjective, we have my, our, their, his or her. These are, like I said in the previous lecture, these are the these are such possessive cases of adjective which are in need of noun to follow them after these words. So what we need to do is to have these possessive cases attached right in the place of adjective. For example, if I say a good car, then I would replace both a and good to that of my car. So that my replaces that certain description, as you can say. So that becomes determiner here. That determines that that there is something that belongs to me, or that shows belonging. So then we have interrogative adjectives. There are so many, as you can say, adverbs, both in shape of what, where, why, when, and how, etc. These are different, I would say, the adverbs. We'll talk about them later. But what I have for you in shape of interrogative adjectives are the chosen three. They are which, what, and whose. They replace the adjectives. If you consider an example, if I say my car, then if I don't know that car that I can see right now before me, who is the one, the owner of the car, then I would say whose car is this. Now whose has come in place of my or in place of his. So when I'm unaware of the belonging, I would replace that with interrogative words such as which, what, or whose. Which way shall we go? Now way is the noun and which is the attachment or describing it interrogatively, the noun. So this is where we can understand interrogative adjectives. Now we have demonstrative adjective on one hand as well. On the other hand, demonstration, where we can simply point at things such as this for nearer singular thing, that for the far off singular thing, then these for nearer plural things, those for far off plural things. Then we even have such and each and etc. So such are the demonstrative, as you can see, adjectives. So let us talk about adjectives in shape of examples. So having discussed the categories, let's talk about adjective. We need to understand how we find adjectives in a sentence. So once again, adjective gives opinions or expresses views or provides estimations. In other words, if we further want to define adjective, for instance, If there is a sentence, as you can see on the screen right before you, goes as Najam works in his office. Now, we need to see or break them in the word classes. That the first lecture I have given you in my grammar series. You need to view that so that you can understand what I'm doing right now with it right here before you. So you have to view that. So Najam is a proper noun. Now I have even discussed noun and its types. So even that lecture should be viewed for understanding the types. So that's the proper noun, as you can see, the subject and shape of subject. Then we have verb, the main verb, as you can see. Then we have a preposition. We'll talk about preposition in future as well in detail. And what is this, by the way? Can you tell me? Any guesses? Yes, I think guessed right. That is the possessive case of adjectives. So that is that possessive adjective which is actually followed by another common noun, that is office. So this is how things have been broken, and that's the first example where you find one adjective coming in play. So through a research, it is found out that in a sentence there is always one adjective present. At least one is present in a sentence, and unlikely we can say that there may not be any adjective in a sentence. It happens, but 90% of the sentences are there in English language which do possess at least a single adjective in a sentence in shape of anything, as you can see, in shape of possessive adjective, what normally can be referred as only possessive case or possessive pronoun. People tend to call it possessive pronoun, but now you have understood that this is to be possessive adjective. So that is the first example. We have another. Now I have modified this into a different sentence, only with one addition. Now the sentence is Najam works in his big office. Now I have added another adjective. Now there are two adjectives in a sentence, so I'm just going to talk about the addition, which is big. Now what is big, by the way? It is a qualitative adjective that is qualifying right now the office, and now it is in shape of size, as you can see. So adjective qualifies in shape of age, in shape of size, in shape of measurement, etc. So we'll talk about that later as well. So two adjectives can be there, and we can add two in a sentence. And now it's time to add another thing in the same sentence. Now let me read the sentence again. Najam works in his pretty big office. Now the word pretty, if we talk about it in a separate thing, then it means beautiful, or it means good looking in a different sense. But since we have added pretty here, in addition to his and in addition to big, specifically in addition to big, so I would have this in a different sense altogether. Now it is actually modifying the quantitative adjective. It becomes a quantitative adjective, qualitative adjective, I beg your pardon once again, but now in shape of a modifier. So it's modifying. It is a different meaning. It has a different meaning differently, but here it is actually modifying the existing adjective, that is big. If I say I have a pretty big house, then it means I have a big house all the way. Pretty, it is actually to modify that I have not just big, but I have an enormous house, I would say. So to make the meaning of big look even bigger, I would attach such modifiers, as you can see on the screen, in the likes of pretty. So let's follow another example. A renowned personality has bought a brand new black car. Now let me break it into word classes first and foremost. Let us start from nouns. Now I have personality, which is an abstract noun. Again, you need to view that lecture of noun and its types. So that's an abstract noun taken from the concrete noun person. So then we have verb in shape of both has and bought. Has is helping verb here, bought is main verb combined together. Then we have another noun right at the end, that is car. This time it is a common noun. Now I have noun, I have a verb. I can skip verb simply. I can simply look at nouns here, and let's find out how many adjectives do I have in a sentence to define these nouns. So to define abstract noun, I have an adjective renowned, which is again a qualitative adjective. And to define common noun, which is car, I have the first adjective in shape of new, which is a qualitative adjective as well. But am I done with that? No. I can clearly see another adjective right after new, which is black, and this time it is once again another qualitative adjective, but this time it is shown to you in shape of color. In the previous example, you found the size of a quality, and here you can see the color of it. So even if I say a new car, it is completely meaningful. But if I say a new black car or a black new car, in other words, then things could be further added. So in a sentence, as you've already heard, we can have more than one adjectives attached. Now let's talk about brand. Now brand is when we talk about brand as the word class, it's a noun. So when we use noun as brand, it gives you a whole new meaning entirely. But we use brand in this sentence only in shape of a modifier, and that is actually modifying new black car, and that by modifying it, that becomes an adjective. So if I say I have a brand, so brand is a noun. But if I say a brand new black car, then that brand remains a noun, but does the modification of a certain adjective that is new or black and used for car. So then by modifying, it becomes an adjective. So isn't that an interesting thing to understand? So one last thing that is left in this example is the use of a. There are two A's here. So what is a, by the way? That's an article. We'll talk about that later. So article is a different thing. Yes, I get it. But articles are, in other words, called demonstrative adjectives. So they are adjectives. We'll talk about that. They are actually used in place of that, one, or say this, etc. So that's an article or demonstrative adjective. Or when we talk about it by shape of knowing as a quantity, so we use a or a only for the replacement of one, O-N-E, one. When we don't say one, we say a or we say a. So that becomes, in this way, quantitative adjective. Isn't that an interesting thing? Now pause the screen and you can find a whole lot of things before you, and I think that's enough for today. That's the first lecture done, and we have seen multiple types of adjectives and how we can locate adjectives in a single sentence. So that's enough for today. Wait for my next very interesting lectures to come on adjectives. Until next time, it is goodbye for today.